Well, here we are with another round of changes in the housing market, and everyone gets a little bit excited and a little bit of expectation about the positivity of this and what it might mean for them. And to talk those through, I want to take you through loan-to-value ratios, the changes in the CCCFA, and where interest rates might be heading. So the loan-to-value ratios first. The Reserve Bank brought those in quite a few years ago to try and manage the housing market a little bit better, knowing that housing prices go up and down, and at that time they were starting to climb. And the recent levels were put in place in November 2021, with the idea being that the housing market was running so hot, the Reserve Bank knows that what goes up must come down. And they wanted to make sure that people were not left overexposed. So what that means at the moment is that the current value of properties has dropped around 18% from peak to trough. People who took out a mortgage at 90% loan-to-value ratio a couple of years ago when the market was at its peak means that their loan is now higher than the value of their house, which is not a great situation to be in. And the Reserve Bank knew that was going to happen, so they put controls in at the time to try and control some of that. So what they're doing now is they're allowing banks to write another 5% of their loans above 80% loan-to-value ratio. It's a tiny, tiny change. It's not going to make a massive difference to the housing market, but it will make a difference to those individuals who can now get a loan over the line, and it will be a very few number of people. The other thing they've done is allowed investment property or banks to lend a little bit more to investors and reduce the loan-to-value ratio from 40% down to 35% deposit. So an investor can now buy a property with 35% deposit, not 40%. Is that going to make a massive change to the market? Not at this point in time. We have an election coming up. We have interest rates at all-time highs for a number of years. And we also have the other changes the government brought in around tax deductibility of interest costs. So investors really are not interested at the moment in rejoining the market. Wait and see what happens later in the year, perhaps after the election. So when we come to CCCFA changes, so those are other things that caused some real pain and heartache over the last few years when they were first brought in with the intention of lenders not writing bad loans to people who couldn't afford them. The changes that have come in as of today means that banks don't have to take into account all the discretionary expenses that all of us have around takeaways, eating out, clothing, entertainment, things like that. So yes, they'll look at it briefly, but they're not going to take that entirely into account when they're looking at whether you can afford a loan or not, because we know that, and we know as mortgage advisors, that people's spending habits change pre and post mortgage. Once you've got a big financial commitment, you're a lot more careful about what you're spending each month. So fortunately, the Reserve Bank is now allowing banks to take a little bit more discretion around how they calculate those things. They're also providing more flexibility to lenders around how some repayments might be calculated in their loans as well. So overall, they're positive type changes. We've seen a positive change from the banks around this, with everyone still cautious about what the expenses look like, but it's helpful. Now, the third change was interest rates. Where are they going? What's happening with them? Everyone asks that question almost weekly. Have we reached the peak? When will they drop? And everyone's hoping they're going to drop and drop quickly. Unlikely to happen right now. At the moment, we're expecting the Reserve Bank to lift the interest rate or the OCR by 0.25 again this month. That will affect floating rates again. Floating rates are high and painful. It won't necessarily affect fixed rates. Fixed rates may stay as they are, or they may shift just a fraction, like another 0.10. So a rate might go from 6.59 to 6.69. But that's about the only change you might see. The general feeling is we reached the peak, but a lot depends on what happens with the economy down the track. A lot depends on what happens overseas. Whether the Russian-Ukraine war escalates, whether China invades Taiwan, whether there's another bank collapse in the US, all those things flow through to what happens with interest rates. So at the moment, you'll notice that the 3, 4, and 5-year rates are lower than the 1 and 2-year rates. And being a typical Kiwi, we go for fixed rates and we always want to go for the cheapest. And what that normally means is that you're going to be locked into a lower rate when the rates start to drop. And perhaps 2 to 3 years from now, you'll be on that 3 to 4 and 5-year fixed rate, and the current interest rates will be much lower than that. That's a normal thing that happens in this market. So looking at where things are at the moment, the markets are anticipating that interest rates are going to drop in the near future being 6 to 12 months. So the anticipation is that rates might start to ease later this year. The thought is the Reserve Bank has over-tightened and they are engineering a recession. So the over-tightening will need to be released a little bit. Rates are not going to drop vertically. They're not going to drop cataclysmically. They're just going to start easing backwards. And the hope is that will be in the low fives by this time or towards the end of next year. You won't see another 2% rate. I won't see it in my lifetime. I'm not expecting to. You may not. We're probably going to be more around the 4s and 5s in the future, which is not a bad rate to have, really. So if you need to talk about any of these things, if you're looking at buying a house or investing or refinancing, give me a call, Jonathan from Simply Finance.